at this point, it doesn't matter whether this is the control plane node or this is the infra node or storage node or worker node. It doesn't matter because every VM needs this configuration. So now I'm gonna get the other VMs from this one. So we'll just clone it. So I'm gonna do the CN1 for my first worker node, and we're gonna go next to create that clone. So instead of doing everything from scratch on the new worker node, we're taking a clone, and we're gonna do a full clone. And we're going to go with the current machine state because the current machine state, as you can see up there in the snapshot, is the state that we are currently in, and that is better for us because we're not copying unnecessary files like snapshots and all that. I don't want to copy the stable state snapshot. I don't want to copy the node setup snapshot. I know that my current state is fine, so I'm just going to make a clone of that current state. Okay. So now my clone is here and we are good to go. So I'm going to turn it on and log into it for the first time and like just peruse the VM and see what I have within it, if everything, is okay. So let me just some checks. I'm going to correct the host name. So to change the host name to the correct one, because this is a clone, so it will have the host name of the previous guy. So this is CN1C1, yeah, for my cluster one. Okay, so let us change that now. So this won't reflect unless I open another terminal or just log in again. So I'll just log in again to the same terminal so that's a trick you could always do, especially when maybe working within scripts. I think this could be useful. So I'm logging in again, and if you look at the name has changed now to CN1C1. Now this is the expectation. This is what I want. Let me also cut my etc/host. So just basic checks, okay? So you can see my IP for CN1C1 should be 10.10.4.6, which means there is some work for me to do here. I need to go and correct that IP address because the IP address that's for the second internet adapter will still be this IP address for CP1C1. Okay, so I'll just go to my settings. So you're meant to be .6, not .5, so change it here. Apply this. Now, after applying, you need to refresh your network adapter. Refresh it. Now also I need to check this. So this is taking 50.4. Now that might be an issue because remember 50.4 is for our CP1C1, but that's okay because that's a DHCP adapter. So when I turn on CP1C1, it's going to take up a different IP address. So I need to make some updates to our NAT network. So I'm going to power this off. And then we're going to make another clone. I can make the clone from either one. I can make it from CP1C1 or CN1C1. I'm going to go with CN1C1 just for some variation. And just go to clone. So this is going to be CN2C1. So I'll make that correction now. CN2C1. We're looking good here. Next, we know all this already. So just finalize that. Alright, this clone would usually take a bit, so just be patient. I'm just going to skip some video till when mine is completed. So I'm going to log in here. So we already know the drill. So you check to make sure you have your configurations in place. You change the You change the network. Okay. And you notice I'm doing one at a time. This is to manage resources on my device because this device, like I said, was a brand new device. I just picked it up for this lab. It had nothing set up in it before, just to give the real experience you would have. And the laptop has an 8 gig RAM. So 8 gig RAM is pretty small, so I have to be a little bit cautious with how I manage resources. If I'm running all of them within VBox and not utilizing the console itself, I'll be fine. So our host file looks good, and we know the IP address for this is 4.7. So I'm going to edit also. This should be a quickie, should not take us time. You remember we'll clone the other one, so we're seeing 6 here, change that to 7. Apply it. Now this would have taken the IP would be on this guy now for the 50 dot I think 4 or so. So but that's okay. Let's also remember to change the name because the name should not be CN1C1 because remember this is CN2. If you look at the top, you see the correct name there. Okay, so I'm logging as root CN1C1. Let me just change the name quickly. CN2C1. All right, so that's good. CN2C1, we're looking good. Let's shut that down. So if you have the space for more nodes, like 3 node cluster or 4 node, 5 node, 6 node, you want more worker nodes, you can go ahead and keep adding as much as you want. But I think 3 for the state of my machine, 3 is okay. So I'm gonna do the headless start for the 3 of them. So this will help me, like I said, save some memory so I can maneuver and carry out the work I want to carry out here easily. Because also there's a screen recorder running, so as it's recording the screen, it's also using a lot of memory. So you just have to manage it. If I was on my main device, I would have those concerns actually. Okay, so we're back here. Let us now. We need to be logged onto the main node, so it was called the master node. That's what everybody called it. But then some activists said, no, master isn't so nice. Like, it's like a master and a slave situation. Those words are too hard. So I decided to call it control plane node. So I'm going to check the guest IP of the CP1C1 just to be sure. So I actually shut down the other nodes and I've checked the IP. And like I said before, it is going to change. So it changed. So I'm going to put in the new IP 192.168.50.6. So an important point here to note is that you can get this IP from the first Ethernet adapter. Just when you go to your CP1C1, just click on it and you'll see the IP address there. It's a DHCP IP, so just copy it and paste it there and you'll be fine. So now when I try to log in again, localhost, I'm in and you can see I'm in my CP1C1. So this is going to act as my installer machine. It's going to act as my bastion for bootstrapping. It's going to act as my jump machine for connecting to my other nodes within the cluster. So I don't need to set up communication directly to those nodes. Anything I want to do, I'll do it from the master node, which is like my control node for everything within the cluster. So absolutely fine. So I think we are very good because remember we have a host only network, so that will allow me to connect to other nodes. We can do a quick test here. CN1C1. I should just go in, right? Because I have a password, it will ask me for one. Yeah, so that's fine. I like it asking me for passwords. It's just a little control I have there. But you can actually make it passwordless. I can begin to show some of those tricks, how to set up passwordless connection within nodes. If that's something you guys would like to see, you can also state that. So Yeah, this looks good. Same thing if I want to connect to CN1, C2. But I'm just going to exit out of here first. We're going to connect to them later when we want to join them to the master node. But for now, it's our control plane setup that we are concerned about. So I'm just going to add that there. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to download the calico.yaml. This is what we're going to use to bootstrap our Kubernetes cluster. So this is going to create a pod network. It's going to do a whole lot of things. I don't want this video to be so long, but you can, when you download this, you can cut out the file and just peruse it and see what it's going to do. So I'm going to make some changes. Right. So, but first of all, let me print my init defaults. So these are some things I'm going to be using for my cluster. Okay. Now for the IP address I'm going to advertise, I'll have to change that to my local. So this is very important. If you advertise the IP address on that network, you saw when I started this up, it changed. Okay, so if you advertise the IP on that network, it means that it could change. It might be fine for 2-3 days, but it could change. Okay, so that network is just for internet connection. So make sure you advertise the CP1C1 IP we defined on the host file, your internal network, because this is a static IP address and it would never change except you go in there and change it yourself, and by that you've brought down your cluster, but you can always change it back. So that's a good thing. Just to confirm, that is my IP. I'm going to run the hostname -I. So these are just commands you can use to test. So we're going to replace that with what we have with the 192.168.50.10. This was for another design. I did this. So we'll just swap it out here with our 10.10.4.5. And I'm going to copy that and run it. So that's just basically going to change the advertised address, the cluster configuration.yaml, which is the file that you have up there. This is a kubeadm config. So what we did here is that we took the kubeadm config and we passed it to the cluster configuration.yaml, because those are the initial defaults that come with the kubeadm config. Now a couple of other changes we're going to make is the CRI socket. We're going to change it to the container D because that's what we're using. So just copy paste those commands as they're shared to you. You don't need to stress yourself. I'm also going to add the API version, the kind. We'll talk more about all these things. The C group driver. These are things I could, explain at other videos as we go into the fundamentals of Kubernetes. But right now, let's just keep bootstrapping our clusters. So we're going to then run the initial configuration. Okay. So that's meant to provide to me, once this runs successfully, it's going to provide to me a hash that I can use to add other nodes to the cluster. But wow, we have an error here, which is not bad, which is good. I love seeing error messages, right? So I love it because it's so helpful. Where the problem is when you don't have an error message. That's when the issue is. So I looked at the error message and it's saying something about my node size. Okay, so I'm going to edit my node size because I try to keep everything very small. It wants me to increase the processor to 2 actually. So I'm going to do that.